Hey, this is Alan Shimel, DevOps.com, and we're here at DevOps Enterprise Summit London 2018. It's actually early morning of the first day of DOES, and the keynote speakers are getting ready to come on, and that would, or the opening speakers, and that would be Gene Kim and Derek Langone of Zibia Labs. But we're lucky to be joined actually by Chief Product Officer of Zibia Labs, right? Rob Stroud. Rob, welcome.
Welcome.
And we have two DOES speakers. One's presenting today, one tomorrow, I believe. We have Stefan Simenon.
Simenon.
Okay.
Yep.
ABN AMRO. And Kurt, I'm not going to pronounce your last name.
Straube.
Of John Hancock.
John Hancock.
Okay. So guys, we're here, this is probably my, I think, sixth, maybe more, sixth DevOps Enterprise Summit. And of course, the theme here is DevOps transformations. And you are both presenting about, the DevOps transformations at your respective companies. And then Rob, obviously, Zibia Labs is a leader in helping large enterprises along this journey. But that worked great for the first 3 or 4 years. Let's dive in a little deeper today. What specifically about your journeys are you each looking to highlight in your talks today? Kurt, we'll go with you first.
Well, the topic of my talk is DevOps for everyone. We're perhaps 4 years or so into our DevOps journey, and of course it started with automations, and we came to realize that we needed something higher level. We needed to orchestrate the releases, and so we spent better part of a year looking at application, release automation tools, and we settled on Zibia Labs. And during that journey, we came to realize a few concepts, which I'll speak to today about. It's enabled us to have a philosophy of bring your own, build, deploy, and DevOps for all apps in the portfolio, legacy included, and also DevOps for everyone. How ease of use, so anyone who can log into a system can log in and see their pipeline in real time.
Stefan?
So I will be talking about the DevOps journey with an ABN AMRO. We started 3 years ago. I will be telling how did we start, why did we start. I will be telling what did we do the past 3 years. We started small with few teams. We started with continuous integration. At some point of time, we selected continuous delivery tools, the Zibia Labs tools. And now we are on a stage, we scaled further. We have multiple pipelines for multiple technologies. And now we are at the stage that we are looking into public cloud scaling. We have a hybrid cloud strategy. We have public cloud in place. And now we're checking how to do with cloud native and all kind of container services.
That's a magic word lately too, is the container and Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So I think though, both of you are hitting on a theme that we're going to see out on the stage here today. And that is that, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we had what I called bubbles or pockets of DevOps at organizations. You had a team or a particular project or, some isolated experiment. For lack of, I think it's a great word for it, for DevOps. But, those have succeeded, hopefully, or lessons were learned, and we tried again. But now we're starting to see the DevOps frameworks propagate throughout the entire enterprise. And that's a very, Rob, even before Zibia, obviously, you're with Forrest, I'm sure you spoke to dozens and dozens. That, to me, is a key switch, right? When you move from isolated teams to enterprise-wide deployments. Kurt, that's what I'm hearing you talk about when we talk about DevOps for everyone. 4 years in,
absolutely.
Same thing with you, Stefan, yeah? So what is it, having great tools like a Zibia Labs is one aspect of it, but there's more than just the tool. Right, there's the cultural aspect. There's sponsorship from above. There's buy-in from below. Rob, what do you think? Even in your current role at Zibia, you're still speaking to many customers. Where are you seeing these kinds of enterprise-wide?
We're at that inflection point in the industry right now where we're going from teams to enterprise scale. And that is not just tooling, as you clearly articulated. It's about people, reporting structures, changing the way we do business. It's about changing budgets as well, budget life cycles. And we're at that inflection point where we're actually going through true organisational change. Even in my day job at Xavier Labs, right, we're living this as well. So, I've gone through a situation where I've flattened management structures and living at, you're changing release cadence, so you're actually coding smaller chunks, smaller pieces, coming up with smaller deliverables that may or may not be, as we have a term, saleable product, or usable product. And at that particular point in time, you've got to actually change the way that the articulate and communicate with your own people and the wider community. And it's a really interesting time because, we're talking to a large number of organisations. Many organisations are struggling with this inflection point change. How do we take what we're doing really well in teams and do it enterprise-wide? And if you don't get the culture part, which we're going to talk a lot about here today, right, and you don't get the organisational part, you don't get the transition from a blame culture to an embrace culture, and a learning culture, you're just never going to get it right. And I think that's what we kind of challenge and trouble with. Certainly that's one of the areas I see a lot of problem, challenges and opportunities right now.
I agree. So, we'd all like to think that moving from an isolated DevOps team to enterprise-wide DevOps is full of sugar plums and fairies. But it's not. It's hard work, and there's often bumps along the way. Stefan, share with our audience, what were some of the rough spots? What were some of the obstacles that you overcame at ABM, and not just you, I mean the ABM AMBER team?
Yeah, so what you see in the beginning, everybody was talking about tools, everybody was making pipelines, everybody was creating Jenkins jobs. But at some point of time, in order to accelerate further, you need to refactor your applications. So from the waterfall way of working, which we used in the past, and there were all kind of monoliths were produced. And in order to do full CI/CD, to do continuous deployments, you need to be able to deliver business functionality in 1 or 2 weeks. And therefore, you need to refactor your applications. You need to decompose your applications. And that is one of the hardest struggle. First, to find out that it is needed. And secondly, after we found out that it was needed, to get the buy-in in place, to invest in refactoring your applications. So a second struggle is the old-fashioned processes we have. And the continuous integration, it was really going smooth. But in the continuous delivery piece, the change management process, the deployment process, there is a separate ops team who do deployments, all kind of checks, all kind of manual activities. These need to get refactored, these processes. That also comes down with getting rid of certain responsibilities. We have suppliers in place who have contracts to do certain kind of stuff. And all these things are impacted when you want to do CI/CD, when you want to do DevOps at scale. So these are the two major obstacles within our bank.
Understood. Kurt, what about you?
Very similar story. We were fortunate in we've had very strong support from senior management. I mean, this wasn't a grassroots effort. It was top down four or so years ago. So obviously changing the process, waterfall to agile, big challenge there. On the tooling, we had lots of business units wanting to bring in their own tools for build deploy the Jenkins, the Team Cities, Urban Code deploy. And, it took us a while to realize if that's what suits your business use cases, go with it. I mean, we're seeing build deploy as a commodity, something of a commodity, right? And what we then offer is the orchestration layer above it and the integration all, and that's what DevOps for everyone, DevOps for all apps is sort of all about. Very similar challenges with the change management process. We have a release engineering organization as well that is very efficient, but once again, more and more automation is being demanded and being required. So we're in that part now. We've gotten over the initial hump, I guess, of getting automation working and showing value, right? Showing how we can get things out the door in a few weeks, but we're still struggling with some waterfall methodology still.
Yeah. So you're not the only one. So
Oh, we can shake
So
hands.
Rob, though, Kurt said something, build, deploy is somewhat of a commodity. It almost makes, I don't know if we're quite there. I mean, maybe in John Hancock, but I'm interested in your views on that, thoughts, after speaking to people in the industry.
I would like to think that build deploy was a commodity for everyone, but the reality is that we actually see it in scaling. It's not quite a commodity yet in most organisations. Not everyone is as advanced as ABN AMRO or John Hancock, and I think many of us are dealing with that challenge now. One of the challenges we see everywhere, which is what Kurt and the team have done very well at John Hancock, for instance, is we are seeing a rise of some new technologies in terms of cloud and containers, which we already touched on. Great technologies, Kubernetes is now a buzzword, and as we all know, and if you look at that opportunity, we see our devs running at that at 1,000 miles an hour everywhere. We're also seeing a greater power to the developer in our organisations to make choices and solutions. And what that normally equates to is a development team making their own tooling choices in most organisations. And that's, I think you actually have to have your CD pipeline, especially under organisational control, to ensure that you're delivering consistent and repeatable experiences, consistent repeatable deployment. And the reality is the tools underneath are going to change from time to time. And they will. I mean, we've just released our latest version of our DevOps periodic table. And
Which we just so happen to have right here.
Yep, there we go. And it's very interesting. If you look in this, we've seen a rise of testing tools, very much, testing automation, testing orchestration. We've also seen a rise of cloud and container tools and add-ons as well. And we've seen, certainly in the CI space, a collapse of that space into just
consolidation.
Into just a couple of consolidated solution sets. And that's going to happen in this industry consistently. And
I'll go one further with you, Rob. I think what we're seeing is a collapse/consolidation of CI, CD, and ARA.
Oh, absolutely.
They're virtually one tool for all of that, does all of those things in many cases now. Right? As enterprises are standardizing on whatever that tool is. And then we see that whole ecosystem, that software development lifecycle, the modern software factory, whatever you want to call it. We are seeing choices being made.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of tools. And that's why, all kidding aside, something like this periodic chart that Zivia this is version 2 or 3?
Version 3.
3. Came out with it. It's a good, I was a chemistry freak when I was in school. I loved the periodic chart. I loved the logic of it, for where you can follow atomic numbers and and just why this is how that's related to that and why it's in a metal or not a metal and so forth. This has some of that logic, right? The way
Absolutely.
they're grouped and the rows and the columns.
We actually follow the concept of the periodic table in terms of the SDLC. And it's very interesting to look at and as we were putting it together, the platform type requirements that are at the bottom of it, it's kind of interesting to see how they've totally transformed in 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think close to at least a third of the elements have now changed and transitioned. And I guess when we do it again next year or later this year, we'll see another quarter to a third change again.
Sure. People who want to download, they get it from the Zibia Labs site?
Yep.
So that would be zibialabs.com.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that, though. Stefan, it was you who mentioned hybrid cloud containerization. Are you guys looking at it, or are you actively deploying containers, Kubernetes, this type of thing?
Yeah, so we have implemented a hybrid cloud situation. So we have a private cloud and we have public cloud, Azure and AWS. Those platforms were made available last year, and now the first applications are moving to it. So we expect 50 to 80 applications to have deployed by end of this year. But next year we want to further accelerate, so we need to do some further preparations to accelerate. So we have defined 7 streams to further prepare, and And one stream is the skills stream, for example. So we need to check what kind of skills do we need to further accelerate, and how do we get and retain the skills. Because in the new world, we need totally other skills than we have now. And also, I'm leading a cloud native stream. What kind of standards do we need to have for microservices, for serverless development? Do we need to have a PaaS framework or not? We're going to do more with Kubernetes Docker. We need to make sure containers are secured. We need to have separate pipelines to move to public cloud. All these kind of things are required, we believe, in order to further scale, to further accelerate next year. And those kind of things we are looking now into.
If I could add just a little bit to that, we have a big hybrid cloud with Azure, no AWS at this time. But we have other groups working on developing in Docker and Kubernetes and doing things, developing new code. But what I'm interested in is using containers for fast database provisioning, and giving a developer an entire environment to work with in minutes rather than days or weeks and hundreds of forms and all that.
I agree. And I think that, so you hit on a couple of key things in there. So first of all, the ability to just roll out complete environments like that, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Including the database,
Absolutely.
which I think for too long was sort of the forgotten man of DevOps. Right? It's hard to do development. It's hard to do applications without the database, right? You got to keep, the data just doesn't exist no matter what they say about NoSQL and all of that.
Right.
You still need a database.
Only the database. And
So-
depending on your technologies, like if you're a DB2 shop, that is a very
Are there
difficult
any?
journey.
No, there
Oh,
are.
there are lots.
There's plenty of DB2s, just kidding. But there's also wide diversity within databases today too. So you need an architecture that encompasses that. And we're also seeing a lot of, at DevOps.com, we're probably a little bit out ahead in terms of we speak to so many different companies and vendors and stuff. We're seeing a lot of action in the database for DevOps for database field and vendors in there. One of you mentioned testing, though. Maybe it was Rob, continuous testing. In that, beyond the big headlines last week, I saw a big acquisition in the space, but we're hearing from our readers and our community how important continuous testing, automating as much as we can on the testing front. And what we can automate, that's okay too. We still need to test. And then security testing or DevSecOps or whatever you want to call this. Wondering what kind of impact that's having at the organizational level. Rob, you see a broader range than Stefan or Kurt at their individuals.
It's really an interesting point. You mentioned the database, which I totally agree is one of the forgotten members of the DevOps family, which is now coming to play. But the other interesting area is we've talked about DevSecOps, and we've been talking a lot about it the last couple of years, right? We're just starting to see that come to be a focal area. Most people equate it to automated testing, which it's not. It's far more than that. It's incorporating the security requirements into all phases of our development lifecycle, secure coding, doing static testing, doing all the various, regression testing, and then, of course, you're doing your vulnerability and penetration testing as well. And what we're starting to see customers and organisations start to do is we're starting to see audit, risk and security and compliance get involved in DevOps now, which excites me, given my background, a lot. And as we bring them in, one of the things they're looking for is these components are embedded in the pipeline, so that the end result is an application, a service, whatever you want to call it. It actually is tested, it's validated, it's got the relevant audit checkpoints in it, and now we're starting to see in the audit community automated auditing start to come out the other end, so that the audit team doesn't have to go back and do retrospective audits anymore. They're getting proactive audit alerts. I think this is the next frontier we're going to go and attack.
And I'm exactly on the same page. Hundreds of hours spent on gathering audit materials is just an absolute waste of effort.
Have we told you about our new privacy policy? Just kidding. A little flashback.
Within ABN we have security implemented in our pipelines. Within our CI pipelines, we have secure coding checks and dependency management checks implemented. And if we see that there is poor security delivered, these builds will fail, and then the developer is forced to fix the issue before being able to continue. And next step, we will be doing dynamic testing. We will be integrating our credentials management in our pipelines. So within Ebenabo, you see lots of focus to get our security improved. We know where the issues are. Now it's all about fixing the issues and making sure we get the management focus to get bandwidth to fix the issues.
You know that so my background is security, right? So this is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
And it's actually the reason I originally got into DevOps, is I thought this was going to be a great way for us to do security better, right? To do it right.
Absolutely.
And you know, doing all of this testing and you know, the emphasis on security is great. Don't lose track of just the simple idea that security is everyone's responsibility, that a developer is responsible for making sure his code is secure, is such a game changer.
Yeah, fully agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Where no one cared about security. I got to get this done on time. Right? I got to get it out the door. We got to get it deployed. They'll fix it later, or they'll worry about security later, or let's keep our fingers crossed, right? And that's not a formula for success.
No, any longer.
Even
Not at all.
the best developers are not aware of security, we see.
No, but they're becoming aware.
Yeah,
of
they're
security.
becoming aware. Yeah.
And I think that is a game changer.
Absolutely.
We've had fortified scans built into our CI/CD pipeline for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where many teams now have it as a definition of done, right?
Yeah.
You
Awesome.
cannot move to the next
It can't be
stage
done until it's
right.
tested. And that's the way it should be.
And what we're working towards now is, you know, when we do static code analysis too, we're now moving to integrating those tools with say, the Rally system, such that if certain criteria pop up, it's automatically opening the story in Rally to be addressed.
That's great. I mean, and that, you're probably out ahead on this, let me just say that. But that's where we want to be, right? That's where we'd like to be. I want to bring up one other area, if we can, and it's something also near and dear to your end of the house, Rob, and that is the idea of post-deployment. So DevOps working with ITSM, with ops. We want to call it new ops, old ops. I've heard, so I'm hearing a lot about this term new ops, right? SRE is another term we hear about. But the idea is that DevOps and this new way of looking at things doesn't end at deployment, right? It's continuous deployment, but it's also based on continuous feedback, improvements, management of it, you know, and so forth. Now, Rob, your roots run deep in the community there. Where do you see the joining of these?
So it's kind of goes back to the original premise around DevOps and was to join DevOps, right? Although if you're on the development side, it was to turn it into no ops. I mean, let's be clear. But there's a great opportunity here. We're seeing the role of the ops team member absolutely transform. They're transforming to become more like SREs or CREs, depending on which definition you want to take, site reliability engineer. But I like customer reliability engineer as a better title, because it's all about what the service consumed by the end user is. And what we're seeing is a mixture in the industry. We're seeing some organisations like a large financial services company in North America, where they're now merging the ops team as an extra team member into the product teams. So they've actually dismantled most of their ops and brought them into the product teams. And what they're doing in the product team is ensuring all the ops testing, all the ops documentation, all the ops pieces needed to function are there. And it's an interesting transformation for them. They're reporting great success. And then we're seeing other organisations where we're just skilling up the ops to look after things like performance, accountability, scalability, and things like that. It definitely requires a new skill set in operations.
Yeah.
One where I know, even in my own organisation, even the ops teams know how to code. Mm-hmm. But the thing I love is we're treating all operations processes as code. And they are a product team in and of themselves. And now they go through the same process, the same DevOps process with their systems and solutions. And where we're seeing great things, like a large supermarket chain has now gone and put the ops standard platform that goes back to development. And if you use that, you actually have an accelerated pipeline.
Got it.
It's awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, guys, we probably run a little bit over our time frame here. I apologize, but I think we had a great conversation. Stefan, you are presenting tomorrow, Tuesday.
Yes.
Kurt, you present later today?
Today, right after the keynote.
Right after, we got to get you out of here then, because that keynote's on right now. Okay, we're going to wrap up this, our first session here at DOES18 London. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Rob Stroud.
Thank you.
Zibia Labs. Stefan, I'm going to let you say your last name.
Simenon.
Simenon of ABN AMRO.
Yes.
Kurt.
Straube.
John Hancock. And I'm Alan Shimel of DevOps.com. Thanks for joining us.